Ciao a tutti e benvenuti a HOMO FABER Italia, il primo programma videocast che vuole esplorare il percorso personale e professionale di italiani che hanno avuto successo all'estero. Conduce Lidia Panarello. Welcome to a new episode of HOMO FABER Italia, the first videocast which aims to explore personal and professional paths of successful Italians who made a career abroad. Today, we're very pleased to have with us Dante Roscini, Professor of Business, Government and International Economy at Harvard Business School. Professor Roscini has achieved a very remarkable career. Before becoming a professor at Harvard Business School, he worked for 2 decades in finance, holding senior positions at Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, and Morgan Stanley. Prior to his career in investment banking, Professor Roscini worked as a researcher in nuclear archaeometry at the University of Rome, as a designer, engineer, and project manager with a Westinghouse Electric Corporation, and he also had a brief time as a management consultant at Boston Consulting Group in Paris. Today, we're very pleased to have with us Professor Roscini, who will walk us through the path that has brought him to Cambridge, Massachusetts. Welcome, Professor Roscini. How are you and where are you?
Nice to see you, Lydia. Thank you very much for the invitation. I am fine. I am in Cambridge, Massachusetts, as you just said.
What does it entail to be a professor in such a prestigious university? And what does your research at this moment focuses on?
Well, listen, I think teaching here is first of all, I would say rather demanding. It's quite competitive. It is very much of an up or out kind of situation. The standards are very high, both for teaching and research. So you're kind of kept on your toes in a way, which is good because it is a very exciting environment, I would say. You have constant intellectual stimulation. And something that's very important for me, because I really believe in lifelong learning, is you learn something all the time. It's also very rewarding from a personal standpoint. I deal with very, I would say, wonderful, bright, smart, if demanding students that tend to keep me young. So I really like that very much.
What are you currently working on now that it's the summertime and the classes haven't started yet?
Yes, indeed. So my focus over here, and you did ask me that, is really mostly about international investing. I tend to look at how companies approach investing abroad, what we call FDI, foreign direct investment, where they purchase companies abroad, they do joint ventures, they start greenfield or brownfield investments, and try to give the students some frameworks on how to analyze and manage, assess the risks of investing abroad. I also look at portfolio investment. In particular, I'm focused on the nexus of macroeconomics and the financial markets. So how fiscal monetary policies influence the response of some of the asset markets.
Let's now take a step back and we want to start from the beginning, from where everything started for you. From your education, when you were at school, what did you dream to become as an adult?
Well, after the primary school in Italy, I then studied in Switzerland and then in France. And at the time, the high school in France, they had what the lycée, right? They had what they call the baccalauréat scientifique. And we did a lot of math and physics, and I absolutely adored those two subjects. Call me a nerd, but I just really liked them a lot. And in fact, I wanted to become a nuclear physicist. That was my dream, was to be a nuclear researcher and a nuclear physicist. Then I talked to my dad, and that led me to change, if you want, a little bit the bend of my studies. But yeah, my dream was to be a nuclear physicist.
And then what did you study at university?
Right. So as I was mentioning with my dad, who was an engineer, by the way, we had many discussions, and he essentially convinced me to try and to think of it in more practical ways. And so I like nuclear, fine, but then why do nuclear physics, which is very theoretical? Why don't do nuclear engineering, which he thought would lead me to more work opportunities. His thought and his fear is that with just a physics degree, I would end up just being a teacher. Little did he know that I would end up doing just that, of course, although having gotten here in a very roundabout ways, I would say, and obviously teaching something very different than the nuclear physics that I was going to study. So yeah, so that's my story. That's how I chose my university, which I did in Rome.
And given this academic background, you naturally started your career in the engineering space, but later on you decided to pivot toward the business world. What has driven you to make this transition?
You know, Lydia, you're right. It was a big pivot for me, and it did come thanks to the Harvard Business School. I have to say that HBS is still and was definitely then a really wonderful way to really rethink your life and your career, and essentially kind of reassess where you are and where you want to go. It's 2 years of learning, very personal. But also of introspection, of talking to a lot of people, seeing a lot of options and opportunity. We say here that they are transformative years. They certainly were for me. When I was accepted at the Harvard Business School, I went to my boss. I used to work at Ansaldo as an engineer, as a nuclear engineer. We were building nuclear power plants. And and I told him I got a scholarship and I was admitted at the Harvard Business School. So I was very excited.
Yeah.
But he really toned me down. He warned me that I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life, that here I had a wonderful career, that I was doing just well as an engineer, that it was a great profession, and that, you know, if I went to the business school, then who knows what I would have done afterwards. In Italy, that wasn't really very recognized. Anyway, it was extraordinary. It's still an experience for me. Thankfully, I did not listen to his advice. I think that's one of the things to remember for any young person. You know, listen to the advice and then choose if you want to take it or not. In this case, I did not. So that's the story there.
So thanks to these 2 years of learning at Harvard Business School, you then decided to pivot toward the business world. You start in investment banking, where you spent for 20 years of your career and you lived across London and New York. Have you experienced any differences between the way we work in Europe versus the way you work in the US? And what has attracted you toward investment banking?
Whoa, that's a lot of questions. I'll start with the second one, which is that I was going to become a management consultant after my summer at BCG. I really liked that. And in fact, here's another anecdote for you. But I got into a contest with a classmate of mine as to who was going to get first at $1 million of cumulative offers. So you needed about 10 at the time coming out of business school, and I went to all of the consultants, and I got offers from everyone, and I won that race. But then serendipity hit, and I was the president of the European club there, and I went to a lunch organized by the head of Citibank in Europe. It was in New York at the time. I wanted to talk to European students on how to increase hiring of European students for Citibank. And I went, and one thing led to another. I got an offer from them. Somehow he liked me. But then I had another friend who was at Goldman Sachs, and he said, "No, you're making a big mistake. If you want to become a banker and not a consultant, well, then you totally need to talk to Goldman Sachs." And that's what happened. I did, and they made me an offer, and the rest is history. And then I spent 20 years in investment banking, 20 intense years, I should say. But going back to your first question about the differences in corporate culture between the US and Europe, there are indeed some pretty profound ones. So I would say Americans are very driven in what they do, and they are ready to invest in what they believe in. They're ready to take risks, I think, in a way, more risks than we tend to do in Europe. I feel like I'd say. They're also ready to pay for performance. They're quite meritocratic not everywhere, but I mean, by and large, certainly in the investment banking world. And And so, and whereas in Europe, we tend to see the young people as almost a free asset or a free, which is a big mistake, I think. And also, they're somewhat iconoclastic. They're more ready to kind of rethink everything. I remember, frankly, that when I went to Europe, Goldman Sachs already thought of Europe as one market. And, we're talking about the late 80s here. So it's a long, long time ago. This is before Europe was actually, an actual, the EU at least was launched and the Euro was. But so they had this vision, which I thought was interesting. And the funny story there is that, of course, compared to at the time when I went to London, the UK merchant banks dominated corporate finance. The old houses, the noble UK houses. And in the space of a few years, the US investment banks, with their more aggressive approach and ability to take more risk and so on, actually ended up purchasing most of their UK competitors. And I remember the UK bankers at the time used to say that the Americans are overworked, they're overpaid, and over here.
You didn't tell us, though, who won the competition about the 1 million offer.
So you needed to have the actual offer letter. It wasn't enough to have an oral offer. You need to act paper, And I won. I must say, I got there first. 10 at the 10th, I was able to hit the $1 million cumulative.
Can you please explain to our audience that perhaps is not so familiar with the world of finance and business, what does an investment banker?
Regular banker, if you want, mostly helps their clients with loans. So they will assess the credits, something I think you're quite familiar with, of the potential clients, and decide if they will lend them money or not. They also take deposits from customers. Investment bankers are different. They do not have deposit taking facilities. They do very little lending, only in special circumstances. They really are financial advisors, I would say, to corporations and government. And at the same time, they're intermediaries in the financial market. So they basically help their clients raise money, raise capital. And that may mean issuing stock or issuing bonds, tapping the financial markets. They will also give them strategic advice, though. So often they will help them with acquisitions of rival companies or other companies. They will help them in selling themselves, arranging the sale of the entire company or parts of the company. And then they provide a series of, let's call them ancillary services, where they do market making, they trade all types of securities, they arrange for derivatives, they will trade, buy and sell equity, fixed income securities, currencies, commodities, and all other types of financial assets. So, they're in the middle of the action. And in the Bonfire of the Vanities, Tom Wolfe book, you may remember that the protagonist was explaining to his daughter that an investment banker was basically somebody who takes a slice of the pie and passes it on from one to another and keeps the crumbs. But I think that's a bit of a superficial explanation.
And you worked then for 20 years in investment banking, this sector. So what has kept you so interested like throughout the years?
Wow. I mean, investment banking is an intense place, and 20 years, do wear you down. But I really, really enjoyed the variety. I did business with companies in different sectors all over the world. So I had to learn a lot all the time. It was, you do deals that then you read about in the Financial Times or Wall Street Journal. That's exciting. There is an excitement in doing deals, by the way. I was lucky enough sometimes to do one of a kind or first of a kind transactions, which was always intellectually stimulating. In fact, it was a little bit of a drug, to be honest with you, to do these transactions. That's kind of how you measured your success in some ways. But also, it was always interesting situations, Lydia. There were always interesting clients. I worked with a lot of engaging colleagues, the very international kind of environment, very alpha type, I have to say, but it's an exciting world. And we were pioneers, and I was there in good years, where many things that today are commoditized at the time were kind of pioneering. So it was kind of fun to do them for the first time.
And now, after working on thousands of deals, manage numerous international transactions, and work across countless cross-border M&As, you had the opportunity to become professor at Harvard Business School. And we are curious to know, how did this opportunity come along to a banker that works in Wall Street?
Right, right. Well, thank you for the thousands. I think it's more like hundreds, I think so, but maybe not thousands of deals. But it's funny. Again, it's serendipity. Here's the scoop for you. I at the time in 2008, early 2008, I was the president of the Harvard, the alumni club, if you want, of the Harvard Business School in Italy, when I was running Morgan Stanley there. And I organized the 100-year celebration of the birth of the school. And the school sent a delegation. I organized a very big party with alumni at the Principe di Savoia in Milan. And the school flew a delegation. And the head of the unit where I work now had graduated at Harvard the year before me. We were contemporaries. And we started a discussion. And they said to me, listen, we have this need to bring in some people from what they call the real world. Help us. Would you help us? Would you consider this? And I was very, very surprised by that. I thought, I'm doing just fine. Thank you. I'm a senior banker. I'm just doing fine. What am I going to do? But then, we thought it through with my wife very carefully. We had young twins. They were about 10 years old at the time. And so we could still move, and it wasn't too difficult. And, I had a really tough 20 years. I mean, my life was hard. It started out hard in terms of long hours, but ended up being hard in terms of, what you brought at home between the ears at night, and the travel and the decisions and the big underwritings and what have you. And so I thought, well, why don't we go for a year? I mean, it's going to be a nice break. I'm not going to ruin my CV if I go teach at Harvard for a year. And, if you want to come back, we'll do that. And then we loved it, absolutely loved it. I came here, found a whole new dimension, personal, professional, family. It was just bliss. And so here I am, 14 years later. It's now the longest employer, actually, Harvard University for me, before Goldman, which was a decade, but not yet the longest professional embodiment, since I was a banker for 20. But so that's the story. Life throws you opportunities, and you need to recognize them and take them when they come along.
Yeah, this is also something that was brought up by other guests that came to this podcast, that most of the time, opportunities that people do not expect, pass next to us, and we just need to grab those opportunities and try to exploit them the most. So,
right, and which is something to for the young people to think about, because I think that sometimes when you're young, you think that you have to get it right the first time. Life does toss you these I call them decision nodes, which you may not see coming, actually, but when you are in one. I mean, classic one is, of course, when you graduate, right? What are you going to do? Where do you go? But that one you see coming, because it's going to come. Others you may not see, but you need to recognize them, and then you toss yourself in a direction, and then life will serve you the next ones. But yeah, I agree.
And given your wealth of experiences, what has been your proudest moment, and also what has been the greatest challenge that you faced throughout this very extensive career, both in the private sector but also in the academic world?
Whoa, that's those are difficult answers to give. I mean, proudest moments professionally, I would say certainly. I remember when I joined Merrill Lynch to head equity capital markets there, and just within 3 years from my arrival, we climbed the league tables, as we call them, the ranking of banks in a particular sector, and became number one from being much below before my arrival. And that was wonderful because it was the combination of building a business, which I had given the opportunity to do. I had been given really carte blanche to hire the right people, to organize things in the right way, and that was just a wonderful moment when we did that. There were also some crazy moments in at the turn of the century when markets were going crazy. The dot-com boom was there, and we could talk about this for a long time. Otherwise, listen, from challenges, of course, I had some of the biggest challenges were, to be honest, were to have to reduce the size of my of the people working for me at times of crisis. We went through several crises, and I really, the things I really disliked the most was to have to tell some of the people I had hired myself that we had to kind of part ways. And always try to do this in the most human possible way, by trying to help them, writing them reference letters, and try to help them find the next step. But that was really the challenging. Here in academia, my I would say proudest moment is it's funny. We get graded by our students, right? We don't just grade our students; they grade us. And they grade us on a scale of 1 to 7. I don't know why historically that's how it is at the business school. And only after a few years, I received my first 7 from the entire class. So as an average, so every student had given me a 7, which is a really great feeling. That means you've done something well. And I was very proud because the transition was not obvious. And I remember some of my more experienced colleagues here at Harvard were looking at me saying, "How did you do that?" kind of thing. How did you actually manage? And that was a really nice moment. And now, every year I look forward to the feedback of the students. The challenge was to adapt to a brand new environment, brand new job. I was 50 years old when I did that, with completely different metrics of how success is measured compared to my previous world. And I really had to put myself in play completely. I mean, you have to imagine, I came from a world where I had 2 secretaries, a corner office, you couldn't even come and talk to me, to one where I made my own slides, of which I'm very proud, by the way, and my students clap me when I do a particularly good one. But it's been, you have to kind of put your dignity on the line and relearn many things. But it was just fantastic. It was just so rejuvenating. It's not even funny. So that's my story there.
What do you think has been the experience that has taught you the most?
When you start to become an old man like me here, you've done a few things, so the decades seem to accumulate. And I would say that it's difficult to say one specific experience, but clearly, every experience leaves you something, right? Mm-hmm. That's how you grow in many ways. I think you learn by seeing others do things, and you essentially adopt what you think is right for you, of course, because it has to be okay for your personality, for who you are, and so on. But certainly, of all the things I've done, listen, 20 intense year of investment banking, of course, I've left a mark. I would say that I've learned many things. They've taught me, if nothing else, that how to be effective under pressure, which is a good skill to have. How to negotiate, which is also a good skill to have in general, and the importance of being precise, responsive. Also, the power of relationships, which over time tend to come to life in ways, again, that you don't really see, but paths in life cross in ways that are unpredictable, and but you may find people that you've dealt with in the past, and it all comes home in a positive way. So,
out of curiosity, what has been the transaction that you work on and that you are like the proudest?
Well, again, many. I mean, the one that I did, one of the ones that I did that was the first was the IPO of Enel, the Italian electric utility, which at the time was the largest ever equity offering done in the world. So it presented a series of structural and marketing challenges that we had to overcome, but it was obviously very exhilarating to do and to say that you basically done that. Yeah, I would mention that one, perhaps the largest IPO.
We would like to know, what would you advise someone that just finished university and is about to enter the workforce?
I have twins, as I mentioned, who were 10 at the time, but now finished college and they entered the workforce themselves. And so I am quite familiar with with the characters of that age. I would say be patient. I know it's not what young people are at all these days, but be a little bit patient. But of course, as you do that, you learn, make sure to pursue your passions. One thing I can definitely say to you is that I think life is too short to be stuck in a job that you don't like or doesn't excite you. So, as we were saying earlier, you must recognize and seize opportunities, but also to seek them until you find the path that you think is the right path. So, I would definitely do that. The other advice I would give, and I know this is not specific, but I feel like I should tell you, is to maintain a learner attitude. You go through school, you learn a lot. Maintain that attitude. I have met too many people in my life who think that because they've had financial success, that success is a validation of the fact that they know it all. Well, they do not. Nobody does. There's an excitement in continuing to learn, both personally and professionally. Don't leave that mentality that you have when you come out of school. And finally, I would say just exercise what we call here critical judgment, right? Do not take anything for granted. Pass it through your own judgment. Believe in yourself, trust your instinct. And as I said, parse the information and the advice that you get carefully. So.
And in light of what you just said, there has been a advice that you were given during your career, except the one from your previous, your first boss, I think, from Ansaldo.
Right.
That you think would be worth to share with our audience?
Yeah, I would say the opposite advice, which is the 3 words, really. Change is good. And I think that's been at least for me, it's been a leitmotif in my life. It's been a real important point of reference. I think every time you change, you get an incredible injection of energy. It broadens your world. It broadens your experience in all respects in terms of what you do and so on. Yeah, I think that's kind of the advice that I would underline. I think that life is non-linear. I guess going back to what we were saying earlier. And when you're young, you tend to think that you have to take the highway right away, and you don't really know when the highway comes. And all you have to do is to do your best at what you do. But it is okay to take calculated risks. That's really what I would say. Challenge yourself as to what you do, where you do it, with whom you do it. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say. No.
And is there any advice that you wish you had known when you were 20, but nobody has given to you?
No, maybe just what I said, which is, that it's okay to take calculated risks. And you don't tend to hear that when you're young. You hear, okay, go do your job, etc. But it's okay to look around. It's okay to seek new avenues. I wish I would have, if somebody had told me that, because I would have been less anxious in some moments of my life.
What are the traits and experiences that you look for in a prospective candidate or research assistant to work with you?
Listen, I would say obviously smarts, right? I mean, you need somebody who has demonstrated that they're, bright, if nothing else. Ideally, intellectual curiosity, the ability to span, to be interested in things, to be excited by new discoveries, new ideas, new thoughts, or better understanding certain phenomena, certain things. And then, of course, ideally being driven and being hardworking, which kind of go hand in hand.
We're about to conclude, and as with the other guests of this program, we have a lightning round. So, in spite of the many years you lived abroad, what is a typical stereotypical Italian trait or habit that you still keep very firm in your personality?
That's a funny question. Two things. The first is that, unlike many Italians, actually, I am not a soccer or football connoisseur at all. It's something that hasn't really never completely caught my imagination. I hear about it, but but when the Azzurri play, I transform myself into a monster, a diehard fan. I scream, I shout. You'd think I'm a coach for how involved I get. So that's, I guess, one. And the second, I think, you don't come out. I said once in Italia, because I don't think you come out from the most sophisticated culinary culture in the world without having things that you cannot do without in your life. In my case, much to, I would say, the regret of my waistline, it's pasta, and I just adore it and cannot do without. So.
Yeah, I feel like you. So yeah, it's a common feeling. Professor Roscini, on behalf of HOMO FABER Italia, I want to thank you for your participation to the show. You have given us great advices, and it was great to hear the path that has led you to where you are. And we want to thank you and wish you a nice continuation.
Congratulations for the initiative, which I think is worthwhile. I think you're doing something that hopefully is helpful to young people who are thinking about their future.
Thank you, and see you in the next episode.